I wasn't expecting anything to happen that night. If anything, I had fully prepared myself for a quiet, awkward countdown wedged between people I didn't know that well, in a house that smelled like burnt queso and dollar store candles. But then we locked eyes, and in those 2 minutes, something shifted. The party was already a mess by the time I got there. It was one of those sprawling house parties where someone invites 20 people and 60 show up. Everyone was already loud, buzzed, sticky with beer mist and New Year's desperation. I didn't even want to go, but my friend Tyler swore I had to come. "You're gonna regret it if you stay in and watch Netflix alone again," he said, half teasing, half serious. He wasn't wrong. I was getting good at turning my solitude into a comfort zone. Maybe a little too good. So I put on the only sweater that didn't scream. I gave up, showed up late enough that I wouldn't have to make small talk with people arriving, and slipped in through the side door with a six-pack no one would notice. I didn't even see him at first. Not until right before midnight. I was standing near the back, half watching the group shout their way through Mr. Brightside, sipping a warm beer and wondering if I could sneak away before the ball dropped without catching crap for it. Then it happened. I turned my head to check the time, 11:59, and that's when our eyes met. He was across the room, leaning casually against the kitchen doorway. Not trying too hard, not loud or flashy like most of the guys at this thing. Just calm, confident. Like he was watching everything, waiting for something better than the chaos around him. He had this dark, tousled hair, slightly damp from either snow or sweat, and a jawline that made me forget how to hold my cup right. But it was his eyes that got me, that kind of eye contact that doesn't flinch, that doesn't look through you. It sees you. And right then, in the middle of a crowded room full of shouting strangers and cheap champagne, I felt something spark. Not nervousness, not panic, just this pull. He didn't smile. He just tilted his head slightly, like he was asking a question I didn't know the words to yet. And then he turned. Into the kitchen, like an invitation. I didn't hesitate. By 12:01, we were alone. The door swung shut behind me, and suddenly the noise of the party was muffled, like we were underwater. The kitchen light was dim, just a single bulb over the sink. The only sounds were the soft hum of the fridge and my heartbeat, which had decided to pick up the pace like it knew something I didn't. He was standing by the counter now, his back partially to me, poking through a half-empty snack bowl like he was just killing time. "Midnight snacks?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned around, leaned back against the counter. "You caught me," he said, smiling this quiet kind of smile. Not cocky, not forced, just real. "I'm Jake," he added after a beat. "Evan?" I said. I realized I hadn't put my drink down yet. I set it on the counter, trying not to look awkward. He glanced at the door, then back at me. "Crowds aren't really your thing either, huh?" I let out a breathy laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "I just noticed you weren't trying to be seen." That comment landed in my chest, like he'd done exactly what I was thinking all night. I felt a flush rise in my neck. Jake's gaze didn't leave mine, not even for a second. "What are you doing in here then?" I asked, my voice quieter now. He pushed off the counter, closing the distance just a little. Not in a creepy way, in that slow, confident way of someone who reads the room before stepping in. "Looking for someone who wasn't faking it," he said. His words hit harder than I expected. My throat went a little dry. "Did you find them?" I asked, because I had to. He took one more step forward. "I think I did." And there it was. The air between us felt charged, like the room had shrunk around us. The kind of silence that wasn't empty. It was full of everything unspoken. My heart was pounding, but not from nerves, from awareness. That this was one of those moments you don't come back from. One of those moments that changes the way you think about connection. I should have said something witty, clever, but I couldn't think straight. All I could do was look at him, right into those eyes that had stopped me in my tracks at 11:59. He broke the silence first. "Do you want to get out of here?" he asked. But not like want a closeness. It wasn't that kind of energy. It was softer, a little uncertain. like he was hoping I'd say yes. Not because he expected me to, but because he wanted to know what might happen next. And I did too. I didn't answer right away, not because I was unsure, but because something about the way he asked, gently, like he was offering me a choice without pressure, made me want to sit in the moment just a little longer. He wasn't looking at me the way most guys do when they ask that question. This wasn't a line. It wasn't a challenge. He was looking at me like he already felt the same strange electricity I'd felt across the room, and now he was just giving it a direction. I nodded. Yeah, let's get out of here. He gave a small smile, barely there, like he didn't want to spook the moment, and turned toward the door. We didn't say goodbye to anyone. I left my beer on the counter and followed him out through the back hallway that led to the porch. The cold air hit me like a slap, sharp and sudden, but also grounding. The party noises blurred into the background as the door shut behind us. From the outside, the house looked like any other New Year's chaos. Flashing lights, people pressed against windows, the thump of bass leaking out through the siding. Jake stuffed his hands into the pockets of his coat. I didn't even realize I'd followed him into the snow without mine. You didn't grab a jacket? He asked, turning around on the porch. I shrugged. Didn't think I'd make it this far. He looked at me for a second, then unzipped his hoodie and shrugged it off. Here, he said, holding it out. It's warm. I run hot. I hesitated, but he gave it a little shake like, don't argue, so I slipped it on. It smelled like cedar and soap, and something a little like cologne, but not enough to be overpowering. His warmth clung to the inside of the fabric like it had a memory. Where are we going? I asked. He stepped off the porch and looked back over his shoulder. Not far. We walked a few blocks in silence. The streets were mostly empty, save for a couple of drunk couples and distant fireworks still popping like latecomers to the celebration. I matched his pace, which was unhurried, comfortable. He didn't feel the need to fill the quiet, and neither did I. That felt rare. Finally, we turned down a street lined with older townhouses and stopped in front of one, with a chipped blue door and a porch swing hanging half crooked. This is me, Jake said, pulling out a key from his back pocket. You're good to come in if you want, or we can just sit on the steps. Up to you. I looked at the swing, then back at him. Inside sounds warmer. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, flipping on a dim hallway light. I followed, pulling off my shoes and looking around. It was a simple place. Hardwood floors, framed prints on the walls, an overstuffed couch that looked like it had history. You live here alone? I asked. Jake nodded. Moved in last year. Rent's not too bad, surprisingly. I fix things around the building, and the landlord lets me take some off. He walked into the small kitchen and grabbed 2 glasses, then filled them with water before handing me one. You want anything else? I think I've got leftover cookies or cereal. I shook my head, smiling. Water's good. We sat on the couch, a little awkwardly at first, like we weren't sure what version of ourselves we were supposed to be now. The party versions? The stranger from across the room versions? Or something else entirely? So, I said, finally breaking the tension, was that your plan tonight? Lure someone into a quiet kitchen and then abduct them into a rental with hardwood charm? He laughed, genuine and low. No, I usually spend New Year's alone, honestly. I almost didn't go to that party either. My roommate dragged me. Guess we both got pulled into something. Yeah, he said, then looked at me, but I'm glad I went. Something about the way he said it, like it wasn't just a nicety, made my chest tighten. I set my glass down on the coffee table and leaned back, stretching out a little, getting comfortable. Jake mirrored me, our knees just barely not touching. The room was quiet in a way that felt intentional, like the silence was its own kind of conversation. He broke it again after a minute. You always that quiet at parties? I gave a small smirk. Only when I'm surrounded by people trying too hard. You don't strike me as someone who tries at all. Thanks, I said, not sure if it was meant to be a compliment. No, I mean it, he said. You seem like you know who you are. I wasn't used to hearing that. I didn't always feel that way. In fact, most days I felt like I was still assembling the IKEA instruction manual for my own personality. But I appreciated the sentiment. What about you? I asked. You always this smooth? He laughed again, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm not smooth. I'm just good at pretending not to be nervous. Are you nervous right now? He looked at me, dead on. A little. I didn't look away. Me too, I said. That changed something, not in a big way, just enough. The tension in the room softened. His posture eased a little, like that confession had given him permission to breathe. We talked for a while. About nothing and everything. Music, bad dates, his weird obsession with hot sauce, my inability to fold fitted sheets. It didn't feel like a first conversation. It felt like one we'd picked up in the middle of something already ongoing. At one point, I realized his leg was now touching mine. Neither of us moved. It wasn't overt. It wasn't even sexual. Just that steady kind of physical presence that says, I'm here, and I want to be close. We sat like that, bodies angled in, hearts cautiously curious. Every second felt like a slow lean into something neither of us had fully named yet. And then he asked it. Can I kiss you? Just like that. No games, no assumptions. Just the question. Open, honest, soft. I felt heat rise in my chest. Not embarrassment. Not hesitation. Just this overwhelming awareness that I was exactly where I wanted to be. I nodded. Jake leaned in slowly, giving me time to change my mind. But I didn't. His lips brushed mine gently, like he wasn't sure I'd stay if he pushed too hard. I kissed him back. Not tentative, but not rushed either. Just real, like we'd been waiting for this since 11:59. The first kiss didn't feel like the start of something. It felt like a pause, like the moment you stop running, hands on your knees, finally letting yourself feel how far you've come. That kind of breathless. Jake pulled back just enough to look at me. He didn't say anything, and I didn't either. There wasn't anything that needed to be said. His eyes were soft, searching mine, like he was making sure I was still there, still with him in it. I was. He smiled, small, lopsided, then leaned in again. This time, it wasn't tentative. His hand cupped the side of my face, his thumb brushing just under my jaw. He kissed like he didn't have to prove anything. Slow, purposeful. Like we had time. And we did. The party was long gone now. The new year had already started. Nothing urgent left to race toward. When we finally pulled apart, it wasn't because the moment had broken, but because we both felt it had said what it needed to. Jake leaned back slightly, letting his hand rest on my thigh. His touch was light, but not casual. There was intention there. I rested my head against the back of the couch and exhaled, quietly laughing. That wasn't how I thought my night would go. Me neither, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I thought I'd sneak out after 10 minutes, pretend I had plans. Maybe fall asleep watching reruns. Solid plan, I said. Honestly, mine was just not making eye contact with anyone until it was socially acceptable to leave. He raised an eyebrow. So what changed? I paused. You looked at me like you meant it. Jake tilted his head, a curious expression crossing his face. That's a good answer, he said quietly. Most people don't say things like that. I don't usually say things like that, I admitted. But it was true. There was something about him that made honesty easy. Like I didn't have to dress anything up or shrink anything down. He didn't say anything right away, just nodded a little, like he understood. Then he stood and stretched, arms above his head, shirt riding up just slightly. I tried not to stare. I'm making tea, he said, walking toward the kitchen. You want? You're full of surprises, I called after him. Who kisses like that and then offers tea? Multifaceted, he said over his shoulder. Don't box me in. I smiled to myself, running a hand through my hair, still buzzing. I had no idea what this night was going to become, but I already knew it was one I'd remember. He came back a few minutes later with 2 mugs, one of which had a chipped corner and read, World's Okayest Human. He handed it to me. Figured you deserved the good one, he said with a grin. The tea was peppermint. I wasn't even a tea guy, really, but something about holding that warm mug while we sat barefoot on his couch felt exactly right. So, he said after a sip, Real question. Uh-oh. If we hadn't ended up in that kitchen, if we'd just caught eyes and you looked away, what do you think would have happened? I thought about it. I think I would have regretted it. Jake nodded, as if he already knew. Same. A quiet beat passed between us. Has this happened before? I asked. With you, I mean. Something like this? He shook his head. Not like this. I've hooked up, flirted. But this? He looked at me again, serious now. No, not like this. I didn't respond right away. Just let that sit. Then I asked, so what now? He gave a slow breath, like he'd been waiting for that question. I don't know, he said. We don't have to figure it all out tonight, but I'd like to see you again, properly, not just in kitchens at midnight, I smiled. I'd like that too. His hand brushed against mine on the couch, fingers lightly finding mine. He didn't grip, didn't rush, just rested there, and I let my hand stay. We talked more after that. About dumb stuff. Childhood injuries, weird phobias, how he once got stuck in a parking garage for 3 hours because he couldn't find the exit. I told him about my fear of escalators. He made a point to dramatically whisper, "Your secrets are safe with me," every time I admitted something dumb. We didn't move to the bedroom. It wasn't like that. We both yawned at some point, and Jake got up to grab a blanket. He tossed it over us and settled back beside me on the couch. Not touching much, just enough. His shoulder against mine. His presence solid. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up hours later with my head on his chest. The sun barely hinting at the edge of the sky through his curtains. His arm was around me, steady and warm, like it had been there all night. I didn't move. Not because I was scared to break the moment, but because, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to leave it behind. The light coming through the curtains was faint, a soft gray that hinted at morning without fully committing to it. I could hear the occasional car on the street outside, the creak of wood as the house adjusted to the day. But inside, everything was still. I stayed exactly where I was, head on Jake's chest, his arm heavy across my side, his breathing slow and even. I don't know if he was asleep or just quiet, but I didn't dare move. Not yet. There's something strange about waking up with someone you barely know but already feel safe around. It's this mix of newness and familiarity, like you skipped a few steps without meaning to. I didn't know his middle name. I didn't know if he drank his coffee black or with way too much sugar. But I knew how he looked at me when the world was too loud. I knew how his voice softened when he was unsure. And that morning, I knew what it felt like to wake up and not want to run. After a few minutes, Jake stirred. His hand shifted a little, fingers lightly brushing my back like a question. "You awake?" he asked, voice low and rough from sleep. I nodded against his chest. "Yeah." He let out a small breath, like he'd been holding it. "You comfortable?" I smiled. "Surprisingly, yeah," he laughed quietly. "This couch is a nightmare for guests. You must be magic." I sat up slowly, stretching out the stiffness in my back. "Or maybe you just made it bearable." Jake rubbed his face, then looked over at me, eyes still soft from sleep. "You want coffee? Or are you a tea in the morning kind of guy?" "Definitely coffee. Strong, black. No sugar, no fluff." He raised his eyebrows. "All right, badass." He stood and disappeared into the kitchen, and I heard the low hum of a kettle heating up and the rattle of mugs. I looked around his living room while he worked, books on the shelf, half a jigsaw puzzle on the table, a plant by the window that had clearly seen better days. When he came back with 2 mugs, he handed me one and sat beside me again, this time a little closer. We sipped in silence for a while, letting the morning settle. "You sleep okay?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I said. "Usually can't sleep on couches." He nodded. "Same. But it was nice having someone there." His voice was quieter than before, almost like he wasn't sure he should have said that out loud. I didn't make it weird. "Yeah," I said. "It was." He looked at me, and I could see something flicker in his expression, like he was weighing the space between what this was and what it could be. So he said carefully, "Does this feel like something to you?" I met his eyes. It does. Good, he said, relief washing over his face. Because I don't want this to be a one-night thing. I don't do this often. Honestly, I don't do this at all. But you, he stopped, shook his head. You feel different. My chest tightened. Not in a bad way, in the way you feel when someone says the exact thing you'd been trying not to hope for. I was hoping you'd say that, I admitted. He smiled again. I think we should hang out, like, properly, a real date, with real clothes, not pajamas and party sweat. Deal, I said, lifting my coffee in mock cheers. We spent the rest of the morning talking about our jobs. He worked at a print shop part-time while finishing his degree in urban planning. I was in marketing, trying to pivot into something that didn't make me feel like I was just selling people things they didn't need. We both hated dating apps. We both had playlists named things like Anxiety Nap and Sad Walk, but make it fashion. We both agreed that brunch was overrated, but pancakes were not. By the time I looked at the clock, it was almost noon. I should probably head out, I said reluctantly, setting down my mug. Jake stood with me, not rushing it, just moving at my pace. I grabbed my phone and wallet from the table, then paused. He reached for his hoodie, the one I'd worn last night, and held it up. Keep it, he said. Just for now. Gives me a reason to see you again. I raised an eyebrow. You need a reason? He shrugged, a playful smile on his face. No, but I figured I'd make it romantic. I pulled the hoodie on and stepped toward the door. He opened it for me, the cold air rushing in like a reminder that real life was waiting outside. I hesitated on the threshold. Hey, he said, voice a little lower now. Thanks for following me into the kitchen, I smiled. Thanks for making eye contact first. We stood there for a beat, unsure of whether to hug or kiss or just nod like it wasn't a big deal. But Jake stepped forward and kissed me again. Soft, intentional. Not a goodbye, a see you soon. And when I walked out into the street, hoodie too big and heart weirdly full, I didn't feel nervous. I felt like something had started. And this time, I wasn't going to miss it. The hoodie smelled like him for 2 more days. I kept thinking the scent would fade, but every time I pulled it on, usually late at night after work when the world was quiet again, I'd get hit with that same warm mix of detergent and something uniquely Jake. And every time, I'd catch myself smiling like an idiot. We texted the next day. Nothing intense. Just that easy back and forth that made it feel like the kitchen conversation never really ended. He sent me a picture of his breakfast, which was aggressively sad. Just dry toast and black coffee, and I roasted him for it. He called me out for using the word aesthetic, unironically. I sent him a meme that made him laugh so hard he said his roommate knocked on the door to make sure he wasn't choking. By the 3rd day, we were planning our first real date. He offered a few options. Something casual like coffee, something cute like mini golf, or something low-key like ordering takeout and watching a bad movie at his place. I appreciated the range, but I told him I wanted to see him outside his apartment first. Somewhere with bad lighting and questionable decor. Somewhere we could both be a little uncomfortable together and call it charming. So we picked this small Korean barbecue spot tucked into a strip mall. Not quite romantic, but not too casual either. The kind of place where the smell of grilled meat clings to your clothes for hours. And the menu is 80% in Korean, which Jake admitted made him nervous. That's the point, I told him. It'll be chaotic. We'll bond. He picked me up Friday night in his beat-up Honda, the inside cleaner than I expected. He was wearing a denim jacket over a hoodie. Not the hoodie, of course. That one was still with me. But he looked good, like he'd actually tried, but not in a way that screamed effort. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd showered right before leaving. It made my heart beat a little too fast. You look nice, he said as I slid into the passenger seat. So do you, I said. 10 out of 10. Minimal effort, maximum effect. He grinned. That's my sweet spot. The drive was full of music and that kind of half-flirty banter that you only do when you're still learning each other. He played a song I hadn't heard, and I made him restart it twice. He made fun of my playlist name, Existential Groove Time, but added it to his library anyway. Dinner was everything I hoped it would be. Chaotic, smoky, loud. We fumbled with the grill at first, unsure which tongs were for which dish. But it didn't matter. We laughed through it. We spilled sauce. Jake tried kimchi for the first time and made a dramatic face that made me lose it. We shared everything. Bites straight from each other's chopsticks, drinks we couldn't pronounce. Somewhere between the grilled pork belly and the banana milk, I realized I was leaning in toward him more than I meant to, and he wasn't backing away. I like this, I said after a lull in conversation. The food? Well, yes, but also us. This. Jake looked at me, his smile fading into something more serious. Me too, he said. You feel easy to be around. I'm glad, I said, because I was weirdly nervous. You? He said. I was convinced you were the cool one. We laughed. But the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, charged, comfortable. After dinner, we ended up walking for a while. The night was cold, but not unbearable. I pulled the hoodie tighter around me, his hoodie, and he noticed. You kept it, he said, voice soft. Of course I did. It's part of your master plan to get me to see you again, remember? He smiled. Worked, didn't it? We walked side by side, brushing shoulders occasionally, and when we paused at a street corner under a blinking pedestrian light, Jake turned to me and slipped his fingers through mine. I looked at him, just looked, and I didn't have to say anything. Neither did he. It was in the touch, the quiet, the way neither of us let go. That night, we didn't go back to his place. Or mine. We just ended it there. Warm hands, full stomachs, hearts humming just loud enough to notice. He kissed me again in the car before I got out, quick but lingering. And when he pulled back, he said, "Let's not let this fade." We won't, I said. Promise. And for once, I actually believed it. We didn't fall into something fast. That's what surprised me the most, how slow and steady it all unfolded, how patient it felt. There wasn't that usual rush, no one trying to force anything, no one pretending they didn't care just to keep some imagined upper hand. It was two people checking in, showing up, and making room for each other. And honestly, that scared me more than I expected. Because when things are easy, when someone's kind to you without playing games, your brain starts digging. You start waiting for the catch. Wondering what's wrong with it, with you, with them. I'd never dated anyone like Jake, not just because he was good to me, but because he meant it. I wasn't a convenience or a distraction or a temporary thing until something more exciting came along. He was choosing me. And that meant I had to choose him back, fully. No part way, no cool detachment. It felt real. And that made me anxious. It started with little things. One night, a week or so after our first official date, I invited him over for dinner. I cooked, or tried to. He showed up with a bottle of wine and a six-pack of beer, just in case the wine was too romantic. We ended up burning half the food because we got distracted dancing to some stupid playlist I'd thrown on in the background. At one point, I turned around and he was just watching me, not in a creepy way, but in that soft-eyed, I'm memorizing this moment kind of way. You okay? I asked, laughing as I wiped my hands on a towel. Jake shrugged, his expression unreadable for a second. I'm just really into this. Being here. With you. That feeling in my chest? That wasn't just warmth, it was something sharper underneath. A mix of, is this what it feels like to be seen? And can I actually handle that? I told myself I'd get used to it, but then things got complicated. Not with him, with me. It happened the next week. My boss dumped a surprise deadline on me. I missed lunch 3 days in a row, and my sleep was trash. I was short-tempered and in my head, and I didn't feel like talking to anyone. Not even Jake. He texted me a few times that Thursday. Just simple check-ins. Jake, how's your day? Jake, want me to swing by with food later? Jake, okay, I'll stop blowing up your phone. Just let me know if you're good. I left them all on read, not because I didn't want to see him, but because I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to show up without the energy to be charming or funny or even conversational. I didn't want to be seen like that. Unfiltered. Frustrated. Small. By Friday, I was buried in guilt. I'd basically ghosted the one person who made me feel safe. And for what? So I could spiral in silence? That night, I finally replied. Me. I'm sorry. Been in a hole this week. Work was a lot, and I didn't want to bring it to you. Still want to see you if you're not mad. He replied 5 minutes later. Jake, I'm not mad. I just miss you. Jake, you don't have to show up perfect. I'm not here for the highlights. I just stared at that message for a full minute. Then another. Because it wasn't the kind of thing you rush to reply to. It was the kind of thing that makes you sit back and breathe. Yeah, he was right. I'd convinced myself that letting someone in meant always being on. That I had to earn affection by being easy to be around. I didn't know how to let someone just hold space for me. So I told him to come over. He showed up an hour later, wearing sweats and holding a paper bag full of pad thai and spring rolls. I looked like hell. Unshaved, hoodie wrinkled, bags under my eyes. But he didn't even blink. He just kissed me on the cheek and said, "Let's eat." We sat on the floor with food between us and the TV on low, watching some dumb cooking competition neither of us really followed. And when I got quiet, when my brain started spinning again, Jake just slid closer and leaned against me, resting his head on my shoulder like that was all I needed to keep from tipping over. He didn't ask for anything, didn't try to fix it. He just stayed. And that was the most disarming thing of all. We didn't say much that night, and I think that's why it mattered. Some people fill silence with noise. Jake filled it with presence. The kind that says you don't have to explain anything. You're already allowed. After dinner, we ended up curled on the couch. The room dimmed down to just the kitchen light over the sink, casting a faint glow into the living room. Jake had pulled his legs up, his feet resting under my thigh like it was second nature. My arm was around his shoulders. His fingers traced slow lines across my wrist, just idle movement. Not trying to provoke anything, just being near. I was tired. Mentally, physically, emotionally. The kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep. But being there with him made it easier to carry. "I'm not great at this," I said, breaking the silence gently. Jake looked up, his brow furrowed just slightly. "At what?" "This. Us. Letting people see me when I'm not put together." He shifted, adjusting to face me better. "Yeah, I've noticed you disappear a little when things get heavy." "Sorry," I muttered. He shook his head. "I'm not criticizing. Just saying I see it. That hit harder than I expected." "I've been that guy before," he said, his voice quieter now. "The one who pulls back when things aren't smooth. It feels safer. Like if you handle your own shit alone, no one can hold it against you." I nodded. It was like he'd pulled the thought straight from my chest. "But here's the thing," Jake continued. "You don't have to perform for me. You don't have to be fun or charming all the time. If you're having a shitty week, I'd rather sit through it with you than be left in the dark." That was the moment something shifted. Not in the relationship, in me. Because I believed him. No one had ever said it to me that plainly. No one had ever made space without also asking for something in return. And I realized that all this time, I'd been waiting for someone to prove they wouldn't leave. Jake wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just staying. "I think I'm falling for you," I said before I could stop myself. Jake's face didn't change at first. He blinked once, looked at me like he was making sure I really meant it. Then he smiled. Not a grin, not a smirk. A real, wide, unfiltered smile, like I'd just handed him something he'd been hoping for but hadn't dared to ask. "Good," he said. "Because I've been falling for you too." I felt a tightness in my chest I hadn't even realized was their start to loosen. Like those words had cracked open a door I didn't know I'd been holding shut. He leaned forward and kissed me, soft and unhurried, the kind of kiss that felt like exhaling, like being found. We didn't say much else that night. We didn't need to. Jake stayed over, this time in my bed. Not for chillin', not for anything dramatic, just to be close. His hand found mine under the covers, and we fell asleep like that. Tangled fingers, steady breathing, the kind of quiet that's louder than anything else. When I woke up the next morning, he was already looking at me. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I said, still a little groggy. "I like waking up next to you." I smiled, my voice barely audible. "Same. We didn't rush to get up. We stayed like that, limbs heavy and warm, wrapped in something new but already steady. Something real. That was the morning I stopped waiting for it all to fall apart. That was the morning I realized I wasn't just falling for him. I was falling into something, a space we'd built quietly, one moment at a time. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of where it would go. There's a specific kind of comfort that sneaks up on you. Not the kind you feel when you're alone with your favorite playlist or wrapped in a blanket with no obligations. No, this one's quieter, deeper. It happens when someone lets you be yourself. Not the curated version, not the version you post, but the real one. The one that still flinches at compliments and tenses up when things are too good. That's what being with Jake started to feel like. He came over more often. Not in that dramatic, moving in too soon way, but enough that his toothbrush ended up next to mine. Enough that his hoodie didn't feel like his anymore. It just lived at my place now. Like he did sometimes. We had our routines. He'd show up on Tuesdays after his late class. We'd eat leftovers or order takeout and talk about our days. Thursdays, I'd go to his place. His roommate, a chill, sarcastic guy named Eli, would roll his eyes and pretend not to notice how Jake and I gravitated toward each other, like magnets in a room too small. Jake wasn't perfect. Neither was I. We had our moments. A couple of stupid miscommunications. One half fight about plans we both forgot we'd made. But the difference was, we talked. We didn't let the silence rot. We sat with it, worked through it. The intimacy crept in slowly. Not just the physical kind, though that was there too. Soft kisses in the hallway, him curling up behind me on the couch, my hand finding his knee under the table when he started getting nervous around my friends. But it was also the small things. Jake bringing me cough drops when I got sick and pretending it wasn't a big deal. Me picking up his favorite cereal without asking. Him texting me, "Made it home. Miss you already," after spending the whole day with me. One Saturday in late January, we ended up back where it all started, at another party, thrown by the same group from New Year's. Jess had dragged me into it again, promising it'd be smaller this time, less chaotic. Jake stood beside me in the kitchen, leaning against the counter while I poured a drink. "Weird being back here," I said, passing him a cup. He looked around. "Yeah, feels like a time capsule. Same lights, same noise. Same kitchen," I added. He smiled, his hand brushing mine. "Not the same outcome, though." "No?" He shook his head. "Back then, I was just hoping you'd follow me. And now?" He took the drink from me and set it aside. Then he reached for my hand, pulling me gently closer. "Now I know you will." I leaned in, pressing a kiss to the corner of his mouth. I was always going to. We stood there for a moment, just like before. In the middle of the noise, the party, the chaos. But this time, we weren't strangers. This time, I didn't feel like I was falling. I felt like I'd landed. Later that night, curled up in his bed, his hand resting on my chest, I asked him what he thought would have happened if we hadn't made eye contact that night. He was quiet for a while, thinking. "I think," he said slowly, "we would have found our way anyway." I smiled. "You sure about that?" "Yeah," he whispered. "Some things are meant to find you." Even in crowded rooms. I looked over at him, eyes half closed from sleep, the corners of his mouth curled up just enough to show he meant every word. And lying there, his breath warm against my neck, his thumb tracing slow circles on my skin, I realized something simple and huge. I had found exactly who I didn't know I was waiting for. And it all started at 11:59.